Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have something for you that's a little bit different, a little old school. We're going to show you how to change the transmission fluid and filter on the Ford E4OD transmission. Now this procedure also applies to the Ford 4R100 transmission, which is basically a beefed up, stronger version of the E4OD you see in this vehicle today. Now the procedure, the fluid, the part numbers for the filters, everything is the same from 89 when it first came out all the way through 2004 when they ended production of the 4R100 transmission. Now this transmission was used in the Ford Bronco, the F-Series, the E-Series, the Excursions, the Expeditions, Navigators, a lot of vehicles. Basically anything that was a Ford truck back in the day used this transmission as their beefed up hauler. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right, first things first, safety. Most of you out there are going to be sliding underneath the vehicle here and working on the trans, so you don't want the vehicle rolling away on you. Make sure it's in park. Make sure the parking brake is set. And me personally, I like to put down some chalk blocks so the vehicle definitely cannot roll away on you while you're underneath here trying to maintain it. So yes, right here in the middle of the vehicle is the transmission. You can see mine's a big greasy mess underneath here. And most of these are really easy to get to because you can get to all the bolts on here really easy. It gets a little tight back here by the cross member on most models, but nothing too bad. And it comes right out of there. Now the E4OD models, I don't think any of them have a drain on the pan, whereas the 4R100 models should all have a drain on the pan, which makes it really easy to drain the fluid out of there and less mess, okay? Now on this one, because the fluid is like from 1998, it's really old, we're going to change the fluid, filter, gasket, and pan. You can see it's kind of crushed in on here and stuff like that. So we're going to change all that today on this one because it's damaged. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's get it draining. There we go. I have a good angle for you guys to sit back and watch it all happen. So if your transmission pan is all gunked up like this one, full of dirt and grease and all that, you want to clean it off the best you can around the seam up here where the pan meets the case, okay? So I'm just going to use some paper towels, some compressed air, and brake clean. Try to get as clean as possible so we don't introduce any of that into the transmission. Okay, so that's a little bit better right there. Definitely cleaner around the seam on there anyway. So at this point, we can start draining the fluid out. If you have a 4R100, with the drain plug, it'll be right around this area. It's a 13 mil drain plug. Get your drain pan ready and just pop it and it'll start shooting it out of there. And it'll drain the whole pan basically. Nice and easy. For something like this, it's old school, we need to pull the bolts off. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drain the transmission back here. So we're gonna unbolt it back here on the sides, all the way up. And we're gonna come to the front here and leave these bolts in. Drain pan underneath it, and then we're going to start loosening these ones so we can do a controlled drain back here into the pan. And that's the way to do it. All right, here we go. These are 10 mil. Coming out nice and easy. It's like someone didn't torque it down. Like I said, we'll start back here. You know, where it's a little harder to get to, and get it loosened. And generally, by the time you're halfway up or 3/4 up, you start getting a drip back here. Let's go in. Ooh, there it goes. Woo! Oh, jeez. And that's the whole idea of this, is to do a controlled drain, because it's a lot of fluid in there, and you don't want to dump it all over the ground or all over you. This fluid smells old school, man. And I worked at a Model T once, and that's where everything in it was original. Gear lube, everything. And it smelled like I was back in the 20s or something. All right. So we'll go ahead and get these ones out now. I'm not even sure how filled this transmission is. This guy's been having some shifting issues, vehicle speed sensor issues, probably old fluid issues, crushed in pan issues, all kinds of stuff like that. So I'd expect a little more fluid by this point. So with this big of a leak down here for this long, it could actually be low on fluid. Alright, good to go right around. We're sagging back here. That's the way to do it. Alright, so we're going to slowly loosen these ones in the front so we can do a controlled drain. Remember, these bolts are only so long. Yeah, this thing's pretty empty. Alright, here we go. I'll be interested to see how much fluid's actually in here. So these last two bolts are holding it on at this point. Oh man, it's greasy as can be. I don't want it to slide on my hand. There's only two bolts holding it, and I'm sure there's plenty of fluid in there still. So we're gonna go ahead and zing it off. And zing it off. Get two hands under here. And you're gonna get hung up back there a little bit by the cross member. Come down and do a controlled drain like that. Looks pretty clean inside of there. It better be at 30-some thousand miles. Old fluid or not. Yeah, this is definitely old school Mercon. It's not available anymore. Yeah, so at this point, it's going to be dripping like this for a while. You want to let it drip and get that good exchange on there. I'm going to move this over just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and pull that filter down. So when you pull it down, it's going to start shooting out this side. So be ready for it. A little wiggle. This one's original. Yeah, that's old school. Oh. Here it is. And one thing you want to look for is this seal right here. A lot of times it gets stuck up in the valve body. Well, it's the case on this one. So if it does get stuck up in there, you want to get a flathead screwdriver at an angle like this. Dig into the seal only, not the case, and kind of pry off a little bit, real slow, and it'll kind of flick it out of there. Okay, it's very important you get the old seal out. The new filter does include a seal on it already. All right, so at this point, we're just gonna let it drip out a little bit and drain while we go clean the pan. One nice feature built into the older Ford transmissions is the ability to actually drain the torque converter out too. So if you have a little plug right here, you kind of just pop it out of the way, but then you need to spin the torque converter. You need to spin it until the plug lines up with the port on here. So you can use the crankshaft bolt on there and kind of just turn the engine over manually. Or if you're down here already, you can just use a pry bar like this, be gentle, and just pry along the case, and you'll move the whole torque converter. And mine's actually right here. There it is. And it's a regular like pipe plug is all it is. Yep, 11 mil. We'll go ahead and just loosen it up. Get your pan ready. Need plenty of fluid coming out of here. It should come out in a nice little stream. All right, it's ready to come out. Get my pan ready. There it is. Just give it time to drain. Remember, it kind of has to introduce air into there and burp itself out. but eventually it starts coming out in a nice stream like that. So you have the trans case draining and a torque converter now. And you can see it's just a regular old pipe plug is all it is. So Ford wants you to change the plug afterwards, but in all reality, you just need to add some thread sealant onto there, which I'll link to down below, along with the rest of the parts that you're gonna need. So yeah, let these drain, and then we can go clean the pan and get that all ready to go back up. Okay, so while that's draining out, we have some time to come over here and clean our pan. So before you start cleaning your pan, you want to take a look at the fluid. Take a look all around the fluid here and see if there's any large shavings of metal, any kind of brass in there, any kind of weird debris in there. This, nice and clean, except for the magnet. What you see here in the magnet right here, this is perfectly normal, okay? It's regular break-in on there, and you're gonna see that. That's the real fine stuff. That's perfectly normal. So if everything looks good, you can go ahead and pull your magnet out, clean it really well, and then we can go ahead and pull our gasket off the pan. It's probably gonna be stuck to it, and clean it both sides with a nice clean rag. These gaskets are elastomeric gaskets, so they're reusable. They should last the life of the vehicle, okay? Pull it off, clean it, so we can reuse it, and then of course clean your pan surface on here and the inside so it's all ready to go back up. Now for me, like I said, my pan is smashed in right here. You can see how it's higher right here. This is the fluid pickup area right here, and it's all smashed in right in this area. So of course we're putting a new pan on here, and you may notice the new pan looks a little bit different. Well, the only real difference with these vehicles, these transmissions, is the pan. So for a long time there, Ford had different pans and filters for 4x2 and 4x4 vehicles. So of course, this being an E-van, it's going to be a two-wheel drive, which is this pan right here. It's flat in the bottom in the pickup area there. Well, this pan's like on 2-month intergalactic back order, so the dealer sent me the 4x4 pan instead, which is fine. If you're gonna do that and use a 4x4 pan though, you gotta realize to match the pan in the sump area, there of course are two different filters depending on if you have 4x2 or 4x4. So of course the shallow pickup on here is for 4x2 vehicles like this. So it goes right down there like that. And then the one with the longer pickup on here, you see it's much, much longer, is for the deeper pan. You know, look how deep that thing is. It's really deep right there. Not to mention any new pans and filters that come out nowadays being sold by Ford are all the latest 4R100 parts. They're not going to be the old E4OD parts. So look at, we now have a drain plug too. So we have upgraded pan, 4x4, pickup and filter to match, and it goes in just like that, and we'll be able to get the fluid in there just like that. In the future, this customer will have a drain on there too. Great. So it works out in the end. But just make sure everything's cleaned up, and we can go ahead and start putting things back together once this torque converter drains out. Like I said, there's a lot of fluid in here. It's a small hole. Just give it time. All right, she's done draining. So I have the drain plug all cleaned up and some thread sealant on there, which I'll link to down below. And we just gotta get it back in there. It's right there, it's not too far in there. So you should be able to get it in and turn it in by hand. Make sure you're not cross-threading it. At least 2-3 threads, and then it'll start tightening up on there, which is what it should do. So initially, we're gonna tighten it. We're just gonna snug it up. All right, looks good. And the actual torque spec on it, if you guys have a torque wrench, is 108 inch-pounds. All right, there we go. Clean this up a little bit. Looks like there was undercoating sprayed all over underneath here when this vehicle was new. I'll go ahead and put the seal back in, or the plug, Just watch it, don't push it in too far. Else it'll go inside of there and you gotta fish it out. There we go. At this point, it's probably been about a half an hour, allowing the trans case and torque converter to drain out, so we are good to go at this point. Pan's cleaned up, magnet is back in the pan, very, 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 very important. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and just clean the gasket surface on here on the case. Make sure it's clean all the way around, so everything seals back up on here real nice. Let's get our filter in. I have the deep sump version for mine. Like I said, I'm transferring over to the 4x4 pan. So it just kind of lays in there like this next to the valve body, and it pushes right into there and lays perfectly like that, and it'll hold itself up. And now it's time for the pan, the gasket, and the magnet. Very, very important. Make sure that magnet's in there. So just kind of get it up in here. I need to get past the heat shield back here, trans range sensor. And just get your gasket basically lined up. Get a bolt through there. And you can start getting things lined up on here. It's a big old gasket. It's a little tougher to move around on here. There we go. Bolt in there. And then I'll usually just go to each corner on here and try to get it lined up. Every bolt you put in is going to help align it better and better and better. Right. Hit it at all four corners. It's very important you put them in by hand so we don't cross thread anything. What you want to do is, like I said, get bolts in at all four corners, start supporting it, and then you can start going all the way around getting the bolts in. Once all these bolts are in, a few threads by hand, okay, what you want to do at that point is just tighten it down in a crisscross pattern. So you're starting from the center, jumping, kind of all over the place, okay, and torque it down. Torque spec on these bolts is 135 inch-pounds. There she is, all back together, clean, right, and tight. Good to go. If you guys have a drain plug on your trans, make sure you recheck the drain plug on there one last time before going topside. Otherwise, if everything looks good to go, back together, we can go topside and fill her up. Time to fill her up. So just about all the Ford vehicles that you're going to be dealing with have the transmission dipstick tube on the passenger side. Somewhere in this area right here, and it's going to have a big yellow handle on it, and it'll definitely say trans fluid on it, okay? So go ahead and take that out, clean it off. This one's extra long, being an E-Series van. Now the fluid you want to use is the Mercon 5 fluid. That's the latest and greatest fluid for these vehicles. These originally called for straight Mercon, but that fluid's no longer being made. So the superseded fluid is Mercon 5, okay? Make sure you have a transmission dipstick tube funnel like this, made just for the dipstick tube. Fits right in there real nice, and we can fill it up right here, okay? So we're gonna start off with the initial fill of at least 7 quarts. And then we're gonna start the vehicle up, leave it in park. We're gonna wander back over here. We're gonna check the fluid level, okay? Make sure we're reading on the dipstick before we ever put it into gear, okay? So because the case drained out for probably half an hour and torque converter got drained out on this one, I would say at least 7 quarts to start, okay? So we'll go ahead and start filling that now. Because this tube is nice and small going down, it's gonna gurgle a little bit, so be ready for it. Don't just pour the whole jug into there. You wanna do it slow. Just something like this. And just give it time to fill and burp. Okay, so at this point we have 7 quarts of fluid down into the transmission. We are safe to go ahead and start the vehicle up. Remember, leave it in park until we get a fluid reading on the dipstick there so you don't do any damage to the transmission. So what we're looking for here is once the vehicle started up and it's sitting there idling in park, we're looking for a reading on the dipstick in the cold range on here. Somewhere on the cold range. So you see one side says a C on it for cold, and then once it heats up, it'll creep into the hot range on here. So we're gonna start it up, and we're looking for a reading somewhere in here. Cold, park, idling, okay? So keep adding fluid until you get a reading somewhere in here. Now at first, you're gonna add fluid, especially in a vehicle like this with a long dipstick tube, and the whole tube's just gonna be covered in oil inside of there, trans fluid. So you're gonna get an inaccurate reading. It's gonna show way overfilled because it's sliding down that dipstick tube that's full of fluid. So it's gonna coat the whole dipstick tip on here. So once you add fluid, let's say you add a quart, you add a quart, you add a quart, you wanna let the vehicle idle for a little bit so it has time to drain down into there before you start trying to get a reading on here. So keep adding fluid until you get into this range right here, the C range on there for cold. All right, let's go ahead and start it up. And we'll simply get a reading on here. So right there you can see we're not even showing on the dipstick. So you need to add a quart at a time until you start getting a reading on a dipstick. All right, so at this point, we have no reading on the dipstick at all. So I'm adding 1 quart at a time. So I just added 1 quart, the last quart from that jug, and we're gonna take a reading. And this is gonna show what I'm talking about where you get inaccurate readings at first until the fluid travels all the way down the dipstick tube. So before, we had no reading at all on the dipstick. No reading, wasn't touching fluid. Now I added 1 quart and you're gonna see it's all the way up the dipstick tube. So we added 1 quart and it looks like, whoa, you overfilled it, buddy. What are you doing? Well, usually one side of the tube will show more accurate than the other side, so whichever reading is lower is the accurate reading. Either way, whenever you add a quart of fluid into there, like I said, let it idle for a little bit, let the fluid travel down the dipstick tube before you try to get an accurate reading, because you're gonna get an inaccurate reading for a while. Let it idle and recheck here and there. Now most of these transmissions, like in the F-Series trucks and stuff like that, they have a much shorter dipstick tube, so it may take a minute to get an accurate reading, whereas this one, I mean, it goes way down to the transmission way back in there. So it may take, 3 to 5 minutes to get an accurate reading, okay? Remember that. You want to make sure you get an accurate reading. At this point, I have a full 10 quarts inside of there, okay? So we're going to check the fluid level one more time and see where we're at. We're trying to get a reading on the dipstick right now. All right, so here we go. We have some sort of reading at 10 quarts. So you can kind of see it right there. It looks like it's really high on the high side. But you bring it around the low side and you can see it's more like right around here. So a quart of fluid's about this much right here when you add it into there. So at this point it looks like we need to add 1 quart of fluid, and then we can go ahead, go back into the vehicle. We're gonna put it in each one of the gears for 10 seconds, okay? So reverse, 10 seconds, neutral, drive 10 seconds, 2, and 1 for 10 seconds each, and then come back through up there. At that point, come back and check our fluid level. We'll go ahead and put one more quart in here, and that should bring us to the top of our cold fill line on there. Now the reason why you go into the vehicle and you put it through each one of the gears is you want to refill the circuits inside the valve body, okay? Actually apply that circuit and that clutch inside of there. Fill everything up. And they put back to park and you get a more accurate reading of what the reservoir is inside the pan. While we're doing all that, this fluid, this last quart, will have time to make its way, travel down into the pan, so we get a more accurate reading. Like I said, it could be like a minute on most vehicles. On these things, it could be 3 to 5 minutes before you get accurate reading. We now have a full 12 quarts inside this transmission, so we're going to check the level one last time, make sure it's in the cold fill level, and then we're going to go for a test drive, get it nice and hot, check shifting, stuff like that. And then we'll go ahead and we'll come back and we'll check it at idle, in park, hot, and we'll make sure that the reading is now in the H range, which is the hot range on here. One last check. And we're right in the cold range. So now is a good time to go for that test drive and come back and do the final check once it's hot. Pretty simple process. If you have the 4x4 pan like we do on this one now, of course it's going to take more fluid, so remember that. But overall the job is very simple, but make sure you have, at least 10 quarts of fluid on hand to get you started. It may take up to 13, 14 quarts. These are big boy transmissions inside of there. So that's all for now. I'll see you guys next time.